If you connected to poll X on slido.com, poll number X896, first question. What is useful in our work and products?
What is most useful?
It should be your work, sorry. What is useful in your work and products?
Yeah.
Access to energy indicator data sets, visualization tools. Don't switch too fast, otherwise the order changes and are lost. Documentation articles, access to experts. So everybody...
You give your rank on each, right? Or you choose one? Yeah, you choose one.
You choose one which is the best, the most useful.
The most useful. And you can edit your answers. So 22, when we get to 30, I suggest we switch.
Not yet. Not yet,
No.
It's coming up.
A few more.
And you wait for the picture.
Okay, 28.
We need two more.
Okay. 30. Good sample out of the room. As I said, we'll repropose again, but we need to go to the other few questions. We have 5 questions. What do you think is the quality of available climate information? That's a generic question, I guess, not just what you've seen here. Your impression in general, where climate stands. It's good. I'm already using it. I'm pleasantly surprised, and I'd like to start using this information. It's promising, but insufficient for my needs. Useless.
It's anonymous, you can say useless.
Okay, 5 people to go. Another one, and 30. It's good. I'm already using it. That wins. Did you capture that, Robert? Yeah.
I did not expect that.
But you capture it. Yeah. That's
Yes,
that's the important part.
I did.
How likely are you to keep? How likely are you to keep using or keep abreast with the latest development of climate services for energy in the near future? I mean, this is a captive audience, so it's a bit biased. But it's good to have confirmation anyway. At least you haven't changed your mind, or some have. 14% have. Okay, let's call it majority. Okay. No, this is the last one. Yeah. Okay, so now it's done. So it was 4 questions. Well done. Great. Thank you very much. So let's leave that. Which one do we leave that? Yeah, that's a good place to leave it.
So yes.
So we are in this final session. So thank you for staying with us until now. I know probably almost half of the people had to leave, but it's great. I think we had a great participation over the last 2 days, a day and a half. And I'd like to just say a few remarks here at the end. Would there be remarks from me, from Robert, Carlo, and also Dominic Marbuti in the audience. And I just want to highlight again the fact that, and not because I was involved, but also looking, I guess, from where I was standing 3 years ago, I think it's quite an achievement what's been done in the last 2 and a bit years. considering the feedback we received and so on. But I think the key here is that we've been dealing with this type of products that I mentioned before as well, that is something that has a high level of uncertainty. It's certainly a new area. It's something that is growing, and certainly not mature enough to go out and base full commercial service. That's the intention. That's where people are moving towards. People are starting to look into that, and it's great. And opportunities are already arising, but it's important also not to oversell what we're doing, and it's important to realize that there is a process of production, of education, of it's just in the nature of things that it takes time to get people acquainted with the products that we're dealing with, which is climate information with a high level of uncertainty, particularly when you go to the longer range of projections. But that's okay, because I mean that's part of the decision making. People are used to decide on uncertainties and take the uncertainty into account. It's just the way we present things, and again, we don't oversell, but we do want to show that there are signals that are worth looking at, and we demonstrated that with some of the results. And so we think that overall there's a lot more work to be done. There's certainly work for at least the next 10 years to get the system in a place where you can say, now it's we could think of reducing the level of support because we have established the market and the research and all the rest, and now it could become self-sustainable. We don't know, but that's the kind of time scale I think it's reasonable to look at from an investment perspective. Otherwise, it's been a good exercise. After the end of the 3 years, we produced quite nice things, but they could become a cathedral in the desert or a little church in the desert. But that's the type of concept. We don't want to remove the support at the early stages of something that we're creating, and that seems to be attracting interest. Of course, there are plans, in the immediate future, there are plans from Copernicus, like we heard from Jean-Noël. The program, the current program ends at in mid-2021, finishes at end of 2020, but the operation goes on for another 6 months, so it's like another 3 years from now. And so over the next 3 years, there's going to be an operational phase of what you've seen. We don't know the details of that and what will happen to that phase, but we know that from what we're told that something is going to happen. And so on that time frame, something will happen, but again, it's important to look also beyond. And so later, Carlo will tell us probably a bit what could be the perspective over the next few years, and Dominique will hopefully help us look beyond those 3 or 5 years. And so, yeah, that's where we are. I think we need to take stock of what we achieved and what still needs to be done. One of the components that we need to really focus on is education, and Robert is going to focus on that aspect now.
Yeah, I just want to mention that, first of all, I would like to thank all the participants for coming, but I also know that you're probably the most aware persons about climate outside the academic world, if you are outside the academic world. And there are many areas, many people in the professional world for which climate is still extremely difficult. There are many people even still having doubts about the reality of climate change. So it's an area where we have to really strengthen the education at all the levels. And it's not only products, it's also talking to people. So that there is what we call co-design, with these co-designing products. So that's one way of training, of course. But we have to train students, We have to train professionals as well. So yeah, just to make a kind of promotion of what we will have in at IPSL starting this year. For 10 years, we have a climate graduate school starting. So it's on climate change, and it will have coordinate all the teachings, all the lectures on climate change, and we also have climate service as one of the key elements of that. So it's called the Paris Climate Graduate School, Graduate School. But I think you probably in the different countries have already that or will have that in the future. And it's extremely important that in the training of students, you as professionals, you participate also to the training. So that's my key message for today. The experience we have with you, you should also have it with the students. Just emphasize one of the things that Alberto said. It takes time. I have the experience of forecasting of air pollution. Forecasting of air pollution is easy. It's a well-defined question. We know we have measurements. We have everything. It took 10 years, basically, to get from research to operations to full operations. Takes 10 years. Here, I'm expecting that it will take more than 10 years, actually, to get a crowd of users well-trained and really taking the topic. And we, at that time, my best hope is that we will be useless, in fact. I will be anyway, so thanks. So maybe...
Yeah. Okay, so I'd like to invite Carlo, perhaps, whether he wants to come on stage or from where you are, and tell us a bit about, I guess, feedback overall, but also the question about when we develop these services, what is the role of Copernicus in terms of interactions with commercial services? Where does Copernicus stop? Where is the boundary? How we blend things? So that's also one key question that we'll have to address as we move on with the services.
Yeah, I will use time wisely, so I don't want to take too long to answer your question. But before I do so, let me just stress, how pleased I am with the result of these two contracts. So it's been a pleasure to work with Roberto and with you, Alberto, and with all the teams. And I'm really impressed by how much you managed to achieve in just a couple of years. So well done, and I really appreciate the work you put into it. And I think the result of this hard work are visible to everyone, and the fact that there are so many people in the room is certainly a sign of that. I just want to go back to what Jean-Noël mentioned in his introduction yesterday. And he mentioned that the SISs are effectively a way of demonstrating the technology. So these two contracts that we had, for which you put so much effort into, were there to show what could be done. And now, at the end of the month, the Climate Data Store will open. Some of you have seen a world preview of the Climate Data Store, and you know all about it. But the idea is really that the Climate Data Store will be there for you to use, for many of you to develop their own application, and that's very much how we like to see it. And in that sense, this is just the tip of the iceberg. Hopefully, I mean, I understand where you're coming from when you talk about 10 years. Hopefully, it won't take 10 years, because we need really to act fast, and there is a huge pressure from the Commission and from Europe and internationally for us to make a step change in the way in which we deal with climate information and in climate adaptation problems. So I hope you will take less, but it's definitely a big challenge, and you're right there. But the idea of the Commission is that part of that role will be played by downstream application, by downstream providers, and so you will be able to use the Climate Data Store to develop your own application, to develop your own value-added proposition and use it. So in that sense, Clean for Energy and ISEM, and I mentioned the acronym this time as a sign of respect.
For one final time.
For one final time, I think should be used as a benchmark, as a point of reference on what can be done with the information, with what can be done with the technology, but do not necessarily represent the provision of data to the energy user as such. The data will be there, the tools will be there, and any of you will be able to develop their own application for downstream exploitation. Thank you. Oh, just one final before I close. An important point is I want to remark. I think I mentioned it to some of you. There are a number of specific calls coming up, and these calls are called use cases. These are relatively short projects, and they are very much targeted to, make easier the uptake from the downstream application. So they are of the order of 150K, and they are in the evaluation of this proposal. The business proposition, the business case, will be one of the key evaluation metrics. So if you have an idea you want to play with, if you have a business proposition you want to play with, stay tuned and look at our website, because there will be opportunity for you.
Good. Thank you very much, Carlo. And if we can have some final remarks about, we'll have some final words as well. But Dominique, please, well, you said you wanted to, so it's better if you can come over here. Yeah, sorry, just a quick introduction for people who don't know. Dominique, amongst other things, he was the director of ECNWF for many years, up to 6-7 years ago, something like that. And then the president of the European Med Society, also, amongst other things, but many more. So just to give you a picture of the stature of Dominique.
Well, good afternoon. Probably the thing which might interest some of you is what's going to happen in the longer future for Copernicus, which is in fact probably the reason why I was asked to say a few things about this, because I'm the French coordinator for Copernicus, and so represent France at the Copernicus Committee with the European Commission. So you probably know that the Copernicus program is organized on the basis of the so-called multi-annual financial framework, which is going to finish, as was mentioned by Robert, about at the end of 2020. And the discussions have already started, I would say, to discuss what's going to happen for the next financial framework, which will go from 2021 until, we don't know. It might be 5 years, might be 7. This is not yet decided. The things which is quite clear from today anyway is that there will still be a Copernicus program in this next framework, which is the important point, and which is of course obvious, being an operational and sustainable program, so there will be some continuation. And the important point also is that from all the discussion which have already taken place with the European Commission, with all the member states, it is quite clear that the top priority for this next program will be the continuity. So namely, ensure that the space component of Copernicus and the service component of Copernicus will be continued, and in a way which we tend to call the enhanced continuity, so namely not only continue the same available measurements and services, but also improve them, enhance them. So that's, I would say, the very much the number one priority for this next part of the program. The second point is that there are a lot of discussions also of now develop some expansions to the program. And as you probably know, something like 75 to 80% of the program go into the space component. And that's where there are a lot of discussions for I would say developing that component and probably developing some new Sentinels. The priority one there would be to develop a Sentinel-7, which would be for CO2 monitoring in the atmosphere. And there are also other ideas which could include a new Sentinel for polar surveillance of the polar areas, for high resolution infrared, thermal infrared, for hyperspectral measurements, and also probably a lot more, I would say, high resolution imagery for the security development of the security service. In this case, that would not be based on new Sentinel data, but probably by using existing constellations which are currently being developed in all parts of the world, and mainly by the private sector. So that would mean buying some data, some images for those services. Clearly, this has all the ideas which are currently being discussed. I think the only thing I could probably guarantee is that the budget will not be enough to develop all those, so they will have to make some choices there. And so it's certainly too early to try to imagine that what will be available during that period. That will be the discussion in the coming years, which will be certainly, as you can imagine, quite tough. And of course, part of it is based on what will be the outcome of the Brexit, which will have an important impact on the European Union budget. I think that's probably well, there is just now about the organization. We are currently discussing how the overall thing will be organized. Just for information, there are some rumors that the program, all the so-called space programs could be regrouped in a single DG. We'll see whether this happens or not. To be frank, I'm not quite happy with that, because I personally think that Copernicus is first and foremost a service program, not a space program. But that's not always the view from the Commission. So we will have to discuss that and see what happens. That's really what I can say at this moment, but happy if there are some other questions to try to answer if I can.
Thanks, Dominique.
Thank you very much, Dominique. Okay, so I suggest we, because we just over the 15 minutes that we said we're going to close, we just now wrap up. You may have other questions. I think some of us will be around for a little longer and ask questions or send us an email. But also in terms of demonstrators, some people were asking about the continuity and so on. As we said, just to remark, the websites themselves are likely to stay up. Certainly, I mean, the contracts are going to end at the end of March. The intention is to keep them up until something is known about the next phase. But no particular maintenance or major questions will be addressed, we think. So that's the state of where we are. So bear with us during the transition. We took the boat up to here, and then ICMWF will think about the next phase, as I said. But there's a lot to play with already. So as we demonstrated, I think there is already a huge amount of data that you can look and play with all the caveats. This is a proof of concept. It's a beta testing website and so on. Still, a lot of useful information. So with that, I think we can start with the thanking, first of all the team behind the organization of the workshop, the symposium. And so Sonia and Nada from and Leslie from the ISEM. We're still allowed to use acronyms for a little while.
Our colleague Pascal Ebner from the ministry, and all those who pushed are accepted to have the meeting here, like Isabelle Benezet, present here. And I say it in French. Je voudrais remercier aussi tous les personnels techniques qui nous ont aidés pour résoudre les problèmes et puis pour que ce meeting fonctionne bien. Et ils sont derrière, là-bas. Donc je voudrais les remercier aussi.
And of course, thank you for the people organizing from a scientific point of view. There were a few, particularly the teams, all the teams of the two contracts. And of course, everybody who had made a great participation during this symposium. I hope you enjoyed it. As we said, we're going to send some surveys, not specifically to the symposium, but to the demonstrator. It's more important for us to gather information about the demonstrator rather than how the meeting went per se. But you're welcome to tell us also how it went. And we like to wish you a safe journey home, and keep in touch by email. And
don't hesitate to contact us.
Okay, thank you very much. Thanks.